What's up everybody, and welcome back to another video series episode on how to build a garage. This one is going to be strictly windows and door frames. You'll see at the very end I kind of fell short just a little bit on some of the content, but I think it's going to be okay. I think you'll get the idea on what we're doing. This is going to be a window here that I'm framing, and the first thing that I always do is mark the header location. The header location is consistent across all jobs. We always go off the walk door height. And by doing that, our windows and doors are at the same plane when you look down the building. And my hope is that it's one of those details that nobody really notices, but it just looks right. So that's what I'm always trying to do, is subtle design ideas that people don't even think of. They just know it looks good, because when things aren't right, they don't line up, that's when people's eyes start thinking, that just doesn't look right, but I don't know what it is. Back to the window though, once I've got the top header installed, I'm going to go ahead and do the bottom header. And all I'm doing is measuring 3 foot down from my top header. Our window boxes are 4 foot by 3 foot. That's the rough opening on our standard windows. And once again, it's one of those things I try to standardize more or less for efficiency. We can do anything. We can custom any window, but that's the standard size. And what I'm doing here is I've already got the layout figured. Just double checking it to make sure that the center of my window is the center of a high rib. And what I mean by that is the tall ribs that are 9 inches on center. I want those to line up so that when my window frame goes in and the window's installed and then the trims are put in, the water can be flashed around them properly and not have the water go right into a rib once it's installed.
So if you notice here, I got the Stabila. This is the LAX 300G, and it's just nice. You can just set it up real quickly, and then I got it marked right where my jamb is, so I can just go right up the frame and screw my jamb perfectly level. You know, when you're doing work by yourself, yeah, Zach's back here in the background, but he's busy, so this allows me to not need a guy to hold the level, push and pull it where I want it. This allows me to just push it right where that laser is and screw it.
The nice thing about a laser is that they're accurate. If you get a good laser, it's going to be accurate. And when you read a level for plumb or level on anything, you're still having to read it. You're still having to look at the bubble and see if it's right. And sometimes, you know, you can look at that bubble and it could be just a little bit off, and guess what? It's going to be off, but it looks right because maybe the angle. And so the laser just works, and it really does make things a lot more precise, which I know we don't need to be that precise, but it's like if it's worth doing right. So just get it done.
So something to listen to is we use GRK screws. These are structural framing screws, and listen to when they go in. There's no effort at all. The driver barely even impacts.
Now during that first window frame, I didn't catch all of the nuances of the window frame, and I didn't show you everything that we do. So real quickly here, I'm doing another window frame. I get my top header in, I get my bottom header in, I get my layout marked, and then I install my window frame. And then this is where I kind of lost you guys on the last window. So once the window box is installed, I then am going to install some backer boards, and these are for just blocking framing so that I've got something good to fasten my window and my trims and steel around. So I take a 2x4, it runs from the top of the top header to the bottom of the bottom header. One of those questions I get quite often is, why do we screw our windows and doors but we don't screw our wall girts on? Most people assume a screw is stronger. Well, it has a great connection, but the actual screw is harder than a nail, which means it can break under extreme forces a lot quicker than a nail. And post frames are meant to move. These large structures, no different than a skyscraper, the way it sways in the wind, post frames will move a little themselves. So we opt for the nails on the main frame, and then we use screws on things like windows and doors, our fascia, our overhangs, because those areas, they're not going to move as much, and we want a nice clean connection. Now obviously I'm sure there's some screws out there that would be much stronger, better than a 20-penny ring shank nail that we're using, but also it comes down to efficiency and cost. So once I get those backer boards installed, I'm going to mark 3.5 inches off of each window jamb, and then I'm going to cut that wall grid out. So I set the depth of my saw to 1.5 inches as to not cut into the window frame, and I'll cut that wall grid out. And this is so that we can install the rest of our window blocking, which is another 2x4, and that's going to go top to bottom. But another thing I wanted to let you know is that we're building this window for an insulated building. We do it a little bit differently if it's not going to be insulated. If it's just going to be cold storage and that's the entire goal, then we're not going to build out the 2x6 box. It's just going to have the window frame around the window. And if anybody is curious, every window, I basically figure one 16-foot board for the window box, depending on 2x6 columns or 2x8 columns, and then I figure two 2x4 16s to do all of the header and miscellaneous blocking around the window. So not sure if you guys are curious, but thought I'd share that also.
Okay, so when framing in a walk door, I've already got this measured. This is the center of a rib. So this is where one of the high ribs is, and that's where we like to frame the centers of our doors. The rough opening is 40 1/4, so I always go 20 1/8 either way. If you want to be precise, I always assume the end of my 40 1/4 is a 10-foot measurement. That way I just always drop 10 off my measurement. So I've got this one at 30 1/8, and I just marked 50 1/4. So it's just a way to be accurate instead of trying to hold at 20 1/8 in the middle and then mark in the end of this, because this is never very precise. The bottom of our walk doors are always 4 inches up from the bottom of the grade, because that's the top of our concrete floor, 4 inches up.
Once I've got the location of the walk door or man door marked, I'm going to use the circular saw full depth so I can hopefully get as far into that board and as straight into that corner as I can. Just going to rip it down. Man, if you're not using cordless tools because you think they're underpowered, you're crazy. This is the 6.5 inch Milwaukee saw, and it's not their biggest saw. They've got a 7 1/4, but to be honest, this is probably my favorite saw to use. It's just very ergonomic, lightweight. It lasts forever on a 9.0 battery, and it just does a really good job of, cutting wood, which is what it's meant to do. So just a little tidbit, don't be afraid to go cordless. Things have changed over the years. Once the block is cut out there where the door is going to sit, we always add a stiffener to the inside of the grade board, and this is a 2x4 ground contact treated board. This is what the concrete will be poured up against in the door. Now, if you've noticed around the grade board, you've seen Zach kind of moving in and out of the camera. He's installing the interior grade board. So we've got an outside grade board that's a 2x8. We've got an inside 2x8 grade board, and then in between those two, down at the bottom, is a 2x6 ground contact treated board, and that's to create basically a cavity. That cavity is going to be filled with insulation. It's going to keep the interior concrete from going in and around your post. So my thought is always to keep that slab floating as much as possible. You don't want it to wrap around your post. You want it to sit inside and move freely. The next step after the grade board is all prepped and done, and I've got my little notch cut out, I'm going to install my door jambs. And the door jambs on the insulated building are going to match the depth of the column. So I'm using a laminated 2x6, which means I'm going to use a 2x6 jamb. So I think I've always said this, but depending on the thickness of our wall is what our jambs are going to be. So after I've got the one door jamb installed, I'm just going to measure over the 40 1/4. So I use the laser on the one so I know it's plumb. So if I just measure over a 40 1/4 measurement on all three girts, the bottom, the middle, and the top, it will ensure that my other door jamb is going to be plumb, and even more important, it's going to be parallel to the first one. And the reason that is so important to me is because when I install the actual man door on the inside, and you look at the reveal that goes around the frames, I want that little 1/4 inch gap to be consistent around the whole thing.
So once that's done, I'm going to put a stiffener board right here, and that's what I just cut up. That is going to lay right on top of those 2x6 jambs, and that helps stiffen that wall.
One thing you always want to do there that I just did was pulled out the speed square. Once I put one screw in, always make sure that your boards are squared up because, you know, historically lumber is never perfect, and most likely you put 2 screws in it, it's not going to be square unless you actually check it. Another little tip that I will pass on to you guys that I learned through a lot of mistakes is that you always want to be diligent to make sure that your walls are plumb before you install any window or door frames. So once again, we just got done putting the roof on. That is going to lock a lot of the structure in place from moving side to side, but our walls still can have some movement. So we're going to still leave our chains on, and we're going to make sure that everything is plumb before we do any of our doors and windows, because obviously we want those to be plumb. Once I get that stiffener board in there, that 2x6, I'm going to put a header on the top, and that's just kind of tying everything together, and it's going to give me a nice place to install the top trim and some screws on the top of the door on the exterior steel. Now this is where, in the beginning of the video, I told you guys that the end was going to have some slacking content, and I did not finish recording this entire process. I don't know what happened. I think my GoPro must have died because the video stops midway into finishing this door frame. Right now I'm measuring for blocking, and I'm just going to fill this space with 2x4 typically. Sometimes we'll use 2x6 if that's what kind of scrap we have left, but it's kind of negligible. That's just so we have a nice solid jamb to install flashings, trims, and to screw the door into. I hope this was another video that was useful to anybody out there looking to build a shop or have a shop built for them or a garage. So like always, I appreciate your guys' support. If you are liking this series or any of the videos or contents or wanting to see more, hit that subscribe button so you can follow along. I've got lots of videos in the queue, lots of work, so definitely hit those questions down in the comments so I can make sure to touch on them in future builds. And like always, hit the thumbs up and share this with anybody that you think might find this useful, because that in the end is what it's all about. Thank you so much, guys.